Over the past 20 years, the Tekken series has become one of the most beloved franchises in fighting games, with an iconic cast of unique fighters and a story full of betrayal, revenge, and redemption, all centered around the king of the Iron Fist tournaments. However, following the story throughout the series can be a bit of a challenge, with such a wide array of characters appearing throughout the series, and the majority of the character cutscenes are not canon. Plus, they just generally get pretty weird. I told you they get weird. So, in this video, we're going to break down and explain the main story of Tekken, focusing on the Mishima bloodline, covering everything from Tekken 1 right up until the end of Tekken 8. So let's get started. The story of Tekken centers around the Mishima family bloodline, that at one point even served the Japanese emperor. And around the time of World War II, Jinpachi Mishima founded a company which would find massive success and growth by manufacturing and selling weapons during the war. However, eventually Jinpachi decided to change the direction of the company as he grew to despise needless conflict. So when the war ended, Jinpachi reduced the size of the company as he wanted to focus on developing his Mishima-style fighting karate and growing his family dojo with his son Heihachi and his grandson Kazuya. But Heihachi didn't appreciate this change in direction and believed the company should continue to manufacture weapons so it could grow in power and influence. So Heihachi staged a coup and seized control of the company, renaming it to the Mishima Zaibatsu. Jinpachi attempted to gain control back from his son, however he failed and subsequently vanished from the public eye. Many suspected Heihachi was responsible for the disappearance, as he was a fierce fighter obsessed with power and would obliterate anything that would stand in his path, and lived his life by the code, all that matters is who's left standing, nothing else. His infamy would continue to grow after the disappearance of his wife, and that he had thrown his 5-year-old son Kazuya off of a cliff just to see if he would be strong enough to survive and become a suitable heir to the company. But remarkably, Kazuya survived. However, he was now forever changed and harbored a burning desire for revenge. And he would spend the next 21 years training and waiting for the right time to exact revenge. Over the past 21 years, the Mishima Zaibatsu had become a massive multinational corporation, thanks to Heihachi's ruthless leadership. So after dominating the business world, he wanted to prove his physical strength too, and one day decided that the Mishima Zaibatsu will host the first ever King of the Iron Fist tournament, a martial arts tournament with a massive cash prize for the winner. However, the contestants will have to face off against each other and rise up through the ranks to take on Heihachi in the final round. Kazuya sees this as the perfect opportunity for revenge and joins the tournament alongside a whole host of other fighters. While many of them proved to be formidable opponents, Kazuya's thirst for revenge would lead him to the finals, where he would face his father. And after a fierce fight, Kazuya would come out victorious, and would decide to exact his revenge with a twist of poetic justice, as he throws him off of a cliff, just as his father had done to him. What an ending. Look at that face. In Heihachi's absence, Kazuya took control of the Zaibatsu, and his quest for power had seemed to come to a close. However, this tale of revenge was far from over. Over the past 2 years, Kazuya has been doing everything he can to grow his power and influence by increasing the Zaibatsu's corrupt activities, by kidnapping scientists and forcing them to work on military projects, increasing the company's military output, and even getting involved with illegal animal trafficking and genetic experimentation. With Kazuya's infamy growing, rumors began spreading that his strength and power came from an unnatural source, and that he may have made some kind of deal with the devil. The Zaibatsu's exploitation of protected animals caught the attention of Jun, a wildlife surveillance officer who descends from the mysterious Kazama line, who are known to practice their own signature Kazama style of martial arts, and are known to be spiritually in tune with nature. As the Zaibatsu drew more criticism from the public, Kazuya wanted a chance to crush any enemies and assert his dominance, so he hosted the second King of Iron Fist tournament, in order to draw out any potential threats and eliminate them. The tournament drew the attention of Jun, as she wanted a chance to put a stop to the Zaibatsu's exploitation of animals, and she also sensed a strange presence around Kazuya that she felt might be corrupting him. Also, the tournament would be the best opportunity for Heihachi to finally exact his revenge, as over the past 2 years he had waited for the perfect opportunity to put his son back in his place and gain control of the Zaibatsu once more. So the tournament commences, bringing in more fighters than ever before. However, Heihachi rises to the top and faces his son Kazuya, and in their bout manages to defeat him. However, the battle was far from over. He quickly discovers the source of Kazuya's dark power, as the Devil Gene takes control, transforming him into Devil. A powerful force with its own persona, will, and desire for destruction that overwhelms Kazuya's consciousness, taking full control of his body. However, internally, Kazuya was suffering from an inner conflict, as during the tournament he had met Jun Kazama and the two had become close, and her pure nature had stirred a conflict within Kazuya against his darker self. Heihachi sensed his inner turmoil and exploited it to defeat Kazuya, and then decided it was finally time to eradicate the Devil Gene and end the corrupted bloodline, so he threw his son into a volcano, ensuring that the Devil Gene could no longer threaten his legacy. However, Kazuya's bloodline would continue, as unbeknown to Heihachi, he had fathered a son with Jun, who she would raise on the remote island of Yakushima, where the Kazama bloodline hailed from. Now, with no one to challenge him, Heihachi reclaimed control of the Mishima Zaibatsu and established a private military group called the Tekken Force, which he would use primarily for security, but also to help him in his pursuit of power, as he would dispatch the force around the globe, trying to track down a legendary ancient god of fighting known as Ogre, as Heihachi believed he could exploit the creature, as he wanted to harness its unique power. Around 15 years after the events of Tekken 2, the Tekken Force finally uncovers Ogre in Mexico, and after the mysterious entity was awoken, the entire squad was annihilated, and Ogre would then begin to travel the world, seeking out other powerful fighters to absorb their strength. Shortly after, the Mexican luchador King would die at the hands of Ogre, and Taekwondo champion Beck would be left mortally wounded in a coma. Meanwhile, in Yakushima, Jin Kazama has grown up living a quiet life, but his mother Jun begins to sense a great evil approaching, so she warned Jin that if anything should happen to her, he was to seek out his grandfather Heihachi. And eventually, on a stormy night, Ogre would finally appear on Yakushima and would attack Jun and her 15-year-old son Jin. As he tried to protect his mother, he was quickly knocked unconscious. When he awoke, he found his home destroyed and his mother was gone, and he began to feel a dark power awakening in him. Driven by his urge for revenge, Jin followed Jun's wishes and seeked out his grandfather Heihachi, who would take the boy under his wing and begin teaching him the ways of Mishima-style karate. 4 years later, Jin had developed into a formidable fighter, and Heihachi felt it was finally time to draw out Ogre, so he announced the third King of Iron Fist tournament, in the hopes that having so many fighters in one place could lure Ogre right into his hands. The tournament took place with many new faces entering the fray, alongside some veteran fighters, as a new generation would rise up to the challenge, such as Horang, a student of Beck, who wanted to seek out revenge for his master, as well as one of King's proteges who was raised in one of the wrestler's orphanages and underwent training with Armor King and took up the title of King 2 in order to avenge the fallen warrior. Also Ling Xiaoyu, a Chinese martial artist who impressed Heihachi when she defeated his entire staff when she had stowed away on his private yacht, who would then be invited by Heihachi to attend school at Mishima Polytechnic alongside Jin. While the competition was fierce and there were so many new entrants, the fighter that went the full distance was the veteran Paul Phoenix, who made it to the final round and defeated Ogre. However, after Paul left the arena, Ogre began to stir as it began to take on a new form, True Ogre. And Jin Kazama quickly stepped up to finally put an end to the vicious beast. However, now with Ogre defeated, Jin was just a threat to Heihachi, so he would shoot down his own grandson in cold blood. However, Jin quickly arises, and Heihachi's worst fears are realized, as the devil gene inherited from Kazuya awakens inside of him. As the devil gene takes hold, he attacks Heihachi and then sprouts wings before flying away, now knowing that nowhere is safe, as Heihachi would use all the power of the Zaibatsu to track him down. After the tournament, Heihachi was now in possession of Ogre's DNA and began to experiment with it, splicing his own DNA with the creatures in an attempt to unlock its power and create a new life form. However, his experiments failed, and the research suggested that in order to combine Ogre's genetic code with another living organism, the devil gene would have to be present. So Heihachi would spend the next 2 years searching for any trace of Jin, to no avail. However, another chance to obtain the devil gene would present itself, as he learned that the body of his son Kazuya was being stored at a biotech firm called G Corporation, so he ordered his Tekken force to raid the building and recover any samples and data relating to their research. However, they would find that G Corp's research had gone further than they could have expected. Kazuya has been revived, and quickly tears through the Tekken force, showing that he is still a force to be reckoned with, who still thirsts for revenge. However, Heihachi was unfazed, as the following day he announced the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4, offering up control of the Mishima Zaibatsu itself to the winner, appealing to both Jin and Kazuya's desire for revenge, in an attempt to lure them into his trap. During the past 20 years at G Corporation, Kazuya had undergone various experiments, where the company investigated the biomechanics of the devil gene, as Kazuya wanted to gain full control over it, so he could harness its power and use it to defeat Heihachi and destroy the Mishima Zaibatsu. While he clearly saw that the tournament was a trap, he knew it was his best chance to defeat Heihachi. Since the last tournament, Jin had been keeping a low profile in Brisbane, Australia. After the betrayal at the hands of his grandfather, he now loathed anything Mishima, so he abandoned Mishima-style martial arts and retrained himself in the art of traditional karate. And as he heard rumors of a new King of Iron Fist tournament, he entered with a burning desire to destroy what remained of the Mishima bloodline. During the tournament, both Jin and Kazuya would quickly climb through the ranks, and both father and son were set to meet for the first time in round 7. However, on his way to the next round, Jin was attacked by the Tekken force. While he valiantly fought through waves of assailants, he was eventually overwhelmed and incapacitated. So when Kazuya arrived at the arena, he was left waiting with no sign of Jin anywhere, where he received word that he would advance to the next round. Kazuya knew that something was awry, and Heihachi had of course played some part in it. However, fearing nothing, he moved on to the next round, keen to fight his father once more. In the final round, the two came face to face once again for the first time in years. While Kazuya was confident he could defeat his father, Heihachi proved that age had not slowed him down and managed to best his son once more. However, much to Kazuya's surprise, Heihachi leaves him alive and says he will lead him to Jin. So the two travel deep into the Mishima compound to a temple called Hon Maru, where Heihachi reveals a restrained and incapacitated Jin, who in his current state is being tormented by visions of his father, urging Jin to give in to his anger. As Kazuya sees Jin for the first time, he's immediately overpowered by the devil gene as his eyes begin to glow red. He then explains that since the second tournament 20 years ago, a part of him has been missing, his other half, which had transferred over to Jin at his conception, and the devil revealed that he now planned to take it back and fully resurrect himself. He thanks Heihachi for bringing Jin to him, and quickly knocks him unconscious, and then attempts to absorb the devil power from within Jin. However, he finds that he's unable to, as Jin will not fully transform, possibly due to the Kazama bloodline that he inherited from his mother. But then, Kazuya is able to wrestle back control and overpowers the devil persona, eliminating it, but harnessing its strength and power, unifying it into his own being. Now fully in control, Kazuya wakes Jin, in the hopes that after defeating him, he might be able to absorb the devil power. However, Kazuya underestimated his son's skill and desire for revenge, as Jin overpowers his father and also his grandfather. Now, with the chance to fully exact his revenge and end the Mishima bloodline, Jin hesitates as he sees a vision of his mother, Jun, which makes him reconsider his actions. Jin decides he wants to walk a different path to the Mishimas and spares Heihachi's life. He then takes his leave, flying through the roof of the Honmaru temple in an attempt to leave the Mishima bloodline behind. However, he would soon discover the bloodline runs deeper than he could have expected. Moments after Jin left the temple, it was bombarded by G Corporation, who had decided to turn on Kazuya and were looking to take out Heihachi at the same time, as Honmaru was stormed by an endless onslaught of Jack robots, forcing Kazuya and Heihachi to fight alongside each other reluctantly. As the two managed to hold their own against the robotic intruders, Kazuya decides to take his opportunity to make his escape, throwing Heihachi to their attackers, who quickly restrain him, while one of them begins to self-destruct, destroying the temple and presumably Heihachi along with it, while a mysterious onlooker reports on the death of Heihachi. While in the burning remains of the temple, a large imposing figure is seen rising up. Meanwhile, not far away, Jin loses control due to the devil gene taking a hold. He awakes in a destroyed forest. Aware that he was responsible for the destruction, he retreats back to Yakushima, where he is still plagued by nightmares that trigger his devil gene. Now knowing what he could be capable of doing if he lost control of his devil gene once more, he starts searching for a way to stop the devil gene's evil power at its root. And when another King of Iron Fist tournament is announced by the Mishima Zaibatsu, while Heihachi is presumed dead and Kazuya is busy tracking down the perpetrators of his betrayal, Jin believes something related to the devil gene could have taken control of the Zaibatsu, so he enters the tournament to see if it could lead to a solution to his affliction. As Jin progresses through the tournament, he comes face to face with Harang and loses. But before Harang can be declared the winner, Jin rises up, consumed by his devil gene, and viciously attacks Harang, almost killing him. With Harang unable to continue, Jin would regain control and continue on to the final round, where he would quickly discover that the tournament was initiated by his great-grandfather, Jinpachi Mishima, who had been imprisoned in the basement of Honmaru by Heihachi 44 years ago. While he had died of starvation long ago, at some point he was reanimated by a demonic entity, and was freed from the temple when it was destroyed. And it was most likely the presence of this demonic force that had been triggering Jin's devil gene. And after the death of Heihachi was reported, he assumed control of the Zaibatsu. Even though Jinpachi is possessed, he retains a small amount of control, and fearing what would happen when the demonic force would take full control of him, he organized the King of Iron Fist tournament in the hopes that someone would be able to defeat him and stop the demonic entity before it became too powerful. Luckily, Jin steps up and is able to defeat him, freeing Jinpachi of the demonic entity. However, now, with no one at the helm of the Zaibatsu, Jin inherits control, leaving us to wonder, will he continue on trying to eradicate the devil gene, or will the power corrupt him, just as it had with his father and grandfather before him? Following his betrayal by G Corporation, Kazuya tracks down the executives responsible for the attack and exacts his revenge, seizing control of the company. He would then shift their focus towards expanding their military operations so that the company could stand a chance against the Mishima Zaibatsu. And in order to start a clash between the two companies, he places a bounty on Jin's head. And in response, Jin announces the 6th King of Iron Fist tournament. Shortly after gaining control of the Zaibatsu, Jin began to act strangely, supposedly hearing a voice inside his head. He would then start deploying the Tekken Force to carry out some covert missions to expand the Zaibatsu's power and ultimately destabilize the world by seizing control of numerous energy sources. He would also declare the Zaibatsu as an independent nation and declare war on the rest of the world. However, a long-standing and high-ranking officer in the Tekken Force, Lars Anderson, felt that the actions the Tekken Force was being ordered to take out were not justified and decided to defect from the force and began leading a rebel army known as Yggdrasil and recruited 50% of the Tekken Force to its ranks, as many disagreed with the actions of the Zaibatsu. Yggdrasil would go on to raid a Zaibatsu lab, where Lars would encounter an android going by the name of Elisa Boskonovich. However, the rebel army's raid is interrupted by G Corporation. During the attack, a Jack robot explodes, knocking Lars unconscious, who would awake with no memory. Then the android Alyssa boots up and escapes the laboratory with Lars. After leaving, Alyssa decides to team up with Lars to help uncover his past. Eventually, they meet with a member of Yggdrasil, who informs Lars that before his last mission, he had been intending to seek out Heihachi, who had only just managed to survive the explosion at Hanmaru, being knocked unconscious and on the verge of death for months. However, he eventually recovered and went into hiding so he could wait for the right time to strike. Meanwhile, Jin travels to a temple in Egypt, where he is approached by Zafina, an astrologist whose village was tasked with protecting the temple and ensuring its tomb remained sealed. She warns Jin about how the conflict in the world was awakening the ancient evil that was housed inside the tomb, as it feeds off of despair. And if the world was to continue to descend into chaos, it could grow strong enough to break free and potentially destroy the world. But Jin reveals he's well aware of the evil within the tomb, Azazel. As he's already been researching it, he also states that he can feel that the creature has begun to stir, and that as it grows stronger, nothing would be able to stop it, besides him, before he takes his leave. Meanwhile, Lars and Alyssa manage to find Heihachi, and they fight, with Lars emerging victorious. And during the fight, his memory begins to return to him. He reveals that he is actually a Mishima, as he's the illegitimate child of Heihachi, who had been conceived during one of Heihachi's missions in Scandinavia. He then tries to shoot Heihachi, and we get this amazing scene. I literally don't even know what Lars's plan was here, because Hayachi literally just slept off a point-blank explosion and is still good to go. So now with his memory restored, he and Alyssa know that their main objective is to stop Jin and the conflict that he ignited around the world. So Lars resumes command of Yggdrasil as they plan a dual attack on the Zaibatsu and G Corporation, storming the headquarters of the G Corporation first, before heading to the Zaibatsu headquarters. During the infiltration, they're attacked by a large robot, but are aided by the mysterious figure Raven, who's been watching the events around the Zaibatsu play out from a distance. But he steps in to hold off the robot for the duo. Lars and Alyssa make their way up the Mishima Tower and find themselves in what looks like a throne room, where Jin emerges and proves to be a formidable foe as he stands his ground against Lars. After the two come to a stalemate, Jin decides it's time to initiate his trap that he's had in plain sight this whole time, as he reboots Alyssa, making her hostile towards Lars, as she was designed to protect Jin and had been used to monitor Lars throughout their journey. Lars manages to defeat Alyssa, and after the fight attempts to help her. However, her programming still overrides her memories and she attacks Lars, then fleeing to regroup with Jin. Shortly after, Raven approaches Lars and they set off in pursuit of Jin, who is now heading to a temple in Egypt. They arrive at the temple to find G Corporation raiding the temple too, and end up in a fight with their leader, Kazuya, who recognizes the Mishima blood within Lars, and warns him that the fate of the Mishima bloodline is to betray one another, and that he won't escape it, before then quickly leaving. Lars and Raven then travel deep inside the heart of the temple to uncover Azazel, who has grown strong enough to break its bonds, and is ready to make humanity atone for their sins. However, Lars and Raven manage to defeat the creature, and the duo flee before the temple collapses, only to find Jin waiting outside, where Alyssa rushes to protect Jin once more, after Lars is forced to fight Alyssa once again, managing to defeat her, who in her weakened state overcomes her programming, and thanks Lars for treating her like a real human, before she completely shuts down. Jin immediately disparages Alyssa, enraging Lars, and the two clash. And Lars manages to overcome Jin, who then reveals that the voice he'd been hearing in his head and the nightmares he had been afflicted with before were caused by Azazel, and he believes that the demon was awoken when Kazuya and Jin fought, as Jin's nightmares and visions had started shortly after, and had a feeling that the entity might somehow be tied to the devil gene. He also revealed that when he gained control of the Zaibatsu, Azazel's voice told him that if the world was filled with negative energy, the demon could take physical form. So Jin used the Zaibatsu to destabilize the world and start conflicts, so he could then fight and defeat Azazel and hopefully rid the world of the devil gene. Azazel then bursts out of the temple, and Jin approaches the demon, surrounded by a dark aura. And strikes it in the chest. The two fall into the temple and disappear into an eruption of light. And it would appear that Jin had managed to vanquish Azazel. However, he has disappeared in the process.
Yes, but what's done is done. Jin put everything he had into this one moment. It's not for me to judge if he was right or wrong. Maybe you're such a saint, you think you can. But somehow, I doubt it.
Lars and Raven leave, taking Alyssa's body with them, as Lars takes her to Li Chaolon to hopefully repair her, while Raven leaves to investigate a body found in the desert, with a distinctive mark on its arm, showing that the devil gene was far from vanquished. After the disappearance of Jin Kazama, the war continued to rage on between G Corporation and the Zaibatsu, with many civilians being killed in the crossfire. One affected civilian was an investigative journalist who lost his wife and son. Wanting to understand more about the conflict that claimed his family, the journalist begins to dig deep into the history of the Mishimas to try and find out how bad blood between Heihachi and Kazuya could have been the catalyst that sparked an international war. In his research, he uncovered a note from a young son to his father saying, "Father, one day I will tear you to pieces," showing that this hatred had started long before the King of Iron Fist tournaments. Meanwhile, at the Mishima headquarters, Heihachi sees his chance to finally regain control of the Zaibatsu in Jin's absence. So he storms the building, fighting his way up to the top, using his fighting prowess to once again gain back control of the company. And after defeating the second in command, Nina Williams, he vows to lead the Zaibatsu back to its former glory by restoring the company's public reputation. So he quickly announces the next King of Iron Fist tournament, as he plans to draw Kazuya out. However, to enact this plan, Heihachi will need the help of someone else, so he travels to Europe to track down Claudio Serafino, who is said to be the world's strongest exorcist, as Heihachi aims to use Claudio's powers to expose Kazuya's devil form to the world, to turn the public against G Corporation. As many saw G Corp as a force for good, as they were one of the only forces to stand up to the Mishima Zaibatsu after they had launched the global war. After leveraging the support of Claudio, Heihachi turns his attention to tracking down Jin Kazama. Back in the Middle East, Raven's troops were transporting Jin's unconscious body to a United Nations base. However, while in transit, the Devil Gene takes a hold of Jin, and he manages to free himself. While he evades capture for a while, he's eventually cornered. However, Lars manages to pick up Jin's trail and comes to his aid, fighting to keep Jin out of the hands of the enemy, as Lars believes that Jin could be the answer to stopping this war. Meanwhile, the reporter continues their research and turns their focus to the G Corporation, and quickly discovers that they have their own dark agenda, after learning that the explosion at Honmaru months before was actually an attack launched by G Corporation in an attempt to eliminate Kazuya, and how Kazuya had then took his revenge upon the board members to seize control of the company, and was now leveraging its assets to his own gains. As he looks into the Zaibatsu's history, he also uncovers how Heihachi had stolen control of the company from his father, Jinpachi, and comes across a name that he hadn't seen before, one that's haunted Heihachi for decades: Kazumi Hachijo, Heihachi's wife and the mother of Kazuya, who had died the same year that Heihachi had taken over control of the Zaibatsu, and his son had mysteriously fallen from a cliff. The reporter was convinced these events must be connected, but the question was how, and he would eventually find his answer while interviewing Li Chaolong, who had an extensive history with the Mishima clan, as he had been adopted by Heihachi at a young age and had been trained alongside Kazuya, developing a fierce rivalry. But he was eventually cast out of the Mishima clan by Heihachi after he regained control of the Zaibatsu during the second King of Iron Fist tournament. So Lee went on to found Violet Systems, a company which specializes in robotics. Lee told the reporter that Kazuya's blood had cursed the Mishima clan, and believes that he had been cast out for knowing too much about the devil within Kazuya. Keen to understand where Kazuya had inherited his cursed blood, the reporter turns their focus to his mother, Kazumi, and the Hachijo bloodline. Meanwhile, Heihachi is meditating at the Mishima family dojo when he is approached by an ominous figure who quickly proves to be a fearsome opponent. However, their fight is interrupted by G-Corp as a number of Jack robots storm the dojo by the order of Kazuya. The surprise attack leads to the two teaming up and quickly defeating the robotic assailants. After the fight is over, Hayachi is impressed and asks the identity of the mysterious intruder, who reveals himself as Akuma, and tells Hayachi that he has been acting on the behalf of Kazumi, who had asked him to kill Hayachi and Kazuya, and has merely been waiting for the right time to strike. While Hayachi can sense that Akuma possesses great power, he stands his ground, and the two fight once more. And after a fierce battle, Akuma eventually overpowers and defeats Hayachi, leaving a destroyed dojo in his wake, and Hayachi once again presumed dead. While no one else was present for the fight, it had been observed from afar by Kazuya, who is greatly intrigued by Akuma's power. Meanwhile, Lee invites the reporter to come for another interview, as he has word that Lars has managed to smuggle Jin into one of his facilities. There, Lars is greeted by an overjoyed and newly repaired Alyssa. Lars explains to them that Jin has been exhausted by his fight with Azazel, and has been unconscious for 2 days, and they must keep him out of the hands of the Zaibatsu and G Corporation. However, the base is stormed by the Tekken Force, led by Nina Williams, where the group manages to infiltrate the building and extract Jin. However, Lee has managed to commandeer their helicopter and self-destruct the base, with Nina and the Tekken Force inside. After Lars, Alyssa and Lee find safety, the journalist arrives and interviews Lars, who reveals that he is also a son of Hayachi, as Hayachi wanted to ensure that the devil gene was not inherited from his bloodline, and that Kazuya had received it from his mother's. Lars also explains that he believes that Jin is the only way to end the war, and they're currently housing his unconscious body. The journalist is conflicted as he harbors so much hate towards Jin due to losing his family in the war that he had started. Finding Jin in a vulnerable state, the journalist considers enacting revenge. However, Lars manages to dissuade him, convincing the journalist that Jin was their best hope to stop the war. Meanwhile, at the destroyed Mishima family dojo, Hayachi arises, surviving the fearsome bout with Akuma, and returns to the helm of the Zaibatsu, where he decides to announce his death to the public, calling off the King of Iron Fist tournament, as now his plan has changed, as Akuma is now seeking out Kazuya, and he would make sure that this would play to his advantage. As Akuma enters the G Corporation headquarters, Kazuya had been anticipating his arrival, and grants his adversary passage directly to him. As the two meet, Kazuya asks Akuma about his origins. Akuma reveals that Kazumi once saved his life, and he intends on repaying his debt by fulfilling her wishes. As the fight rages on between them, Akuma proves himself to be a fearsome opponent, and Kazuya is forced to draw upon his devil power, revealing his devil form. However, unbeknown to them, their bout has been observed from a distance by Hayachi and the Zaibatsu, as they had managed to capture footage of Kazuya's devil form. And now Hayachi wanted to dispatch of both of them, using an orbital laser to kill Kazuya and Akuma at the same time. News quickly spreads of Kazuya's devil form, and the public opinion quickly turns against the G Corporation, and the Mishima Zaibatsu regains its public favor. However, Kazuya couldn't be stopped so easily, as he manages to survive the attack, and in retaliation destroys the Zaibatsu's satellite, which begins to break up in the atmosphere, raining down on the Earth, causing mass destruction. Once again turning the public against the Zaibatsu, as the media blames them for the satellite falling. The journalist, feeling overwhelmed by the evil and suffering of this conflict, approaches the Mishima Zaibatsu to try and speak with someone there directly. While first he's turned away, eventually he is invited to speak directly with Hayachi, where he reveals to the journalist more about his and Kazumi's past, explaining how the two had met while training at his family dojo, starting as rivals but quickly becoming inseparable, and eventually conceiving their son Kazuya and living happily together. Until one day, when Kazumi collapsed, becoming afflicted with a fever. While Hayachi nursed her back to health, she attacked him, acting like she was possessed by another entity. The next day, she remembered nothing and was fine. However, these bouts would continue until one day she confronted Hayachi while he trained, telling him that she intended to kill him, as one day he would pose a great threat to the world, and that she had only married him at the wishes of the Hachijo clan. who had a long lineage of assassins who possessed the devil gene and would use it to eliminate those that would threaten the fate of the world. As the two fight, Kazumi reveals her devil form and attempts to take the life of Heihachi. While he feels conflicted, he manages to eventually defeat her. However, after she attempts to attack him once again, he grabs her by the throat and realizes she was no longer the woman that he had fallen in love with, and finally kills her. Leaving himself devastated. He also reveals to the journalist that when he threw Kazuya from the cliff, he had done so as he feared that he had inherited the devil gene, and after seeing that he had survived, he knew his son had the same affliction as his wife, and laments not killing him then. The interview comes to an abrupt end, as the journalist is apprehended by the Tekken Force, and Heihachi reveals that he knows the journalist has been working with Lars. Before Heihachi leaves, the journalist asks, what does the war mean to him? Heihachi remains silent and the journalist is knocked out. While preparing to face Kazuya, the question lingers in his mind, and he states, a fight is about who is left standing, nothing else. And then goes on to confront Kazuya for a fight where only one will be left standing. While Heihachi appears to have the upper hand, Kazuya won't give up and draws more power than ever before from the devil gene, transforming into a new form of devil, and he unleashes his full wrath upon Heihachi. Who somehow manages to stand up through all the punishment and continues to fight back, managing to deal some devastating blows to Kazuya. Eventually making him revert back to his human form. The two fighters, now exhausted, lumber towards each other, throwing heavy blows. Kazuya looks at his father and sees him younger on the day when he had been thrown from the cliff. With the memories of that day and its pain and torment running through him, his rage builds up inside and he puts everything he has into one final blow. Heihachi Mishima is finally dead, and Kazuya decides to end it just as their feud had begun, and drops Heihachi from a cliff into the surrounding lava, and repeats Heihachi's mantra. With one less person to stand up to Kazuya, the future looks to be ruled by the devil gene, as G Corporation had no intention of stopping the war. However, Lars, Lee, and Alyssa were ready to bet that the only thing that could stop a devil would be its son.
Kazuya, 俺が殺す。
6 months later, Lars' army Yggdrasil, with the backing of Violet Systems, is ready to launch a surprise attack on Kazuya, spearheaded by Jin Kazama, who confronts Kazuya in front of the world in New York. During their fight, both of them draw on the power of the Devil Gene, causing massive destruction. However, Kazuya manages to overpower Jin and taunts him by killing innocent bystanders, causing Jin to lose control, being consumed by the Devil Gene once again, and viciously attacks Kazuya. However, his father retains his composure and swiftly defeats Jin. Kazuya then taunts humanity, claiming the world has become weak and spineless. Turning to the sky, he destroys a wide array of satellites, causing widespread communication outages. He then announces that G Corporation will be holding the 8th King of Iron Fist tournament. But this time, each country will be fighting to save their nation from destruction, as the losing countries will be wiped from the earth. After his defeat, Jin has a vision, where he rejects the Devil Gene, as he refuses to be anything like his father. He then recounts memories of his mother, before falling unconscious. 1 week later, Jin continues his training, and while sparring with Lars, his performance is observed by Lee, who states that overall he seems weaker, and his abilities appear diminished. And as Jin tries to draw upon the power of the Devil Gene, he finds himself unable to utilize its power. 3 days later, Jin continues to struggle, when Elisa approaches him and reassures him that she and everyone have faith in him, but Jin worries that he might not be worthy of their trust, as he fears his father's bloodline may have tainted him irreparably. Meanwhile, Lee and Lars discuss contacting experts who are researching the Devil Gene to see if they could be of any help to Jin and his struggle with the Devil Gene. They also consider sending Elisa to the tournament instead of Jin. But Jin isn't ready to back down and believes that the tournament could reignite the Devil Gene, as he recalls that the first time it manifested was when he faced death in the heat of battle. Lars warns that the tournament could be a trap laid out by G Corporation. However, Jin is resolute that he will enter and end Kazuya, even if he would die in the process. 3 days later, the King of Iron Fist tournament has commenced, and fighters from all over the world have begun to come together to fight for their nations. While Kazuya watches on, pleased to see the world descending into a free-for-all for survival. As Jin begins to make his way to the stage, he encounters a young woman going by the name Reina, who seems to be familiar with Jin, and with a chipper demeanor, she tells him that she attends Mishima Polytechnic, just as Jin had, and hopes to fight him in the next round. Jin, however, pays her no mind and walks past, in typical Jin fashion. As Jin progresses to the semi-finals, the two are matched up, and Reina seems very enthusiastic to fight Jin. Before the fight, she warns that she's tougher than she looks, and during the fight, that proves true. And Jin is surprised to see her using techniques reminiscent of his late grandfather Heihachi, as she fights using Mishima-style karate. During the fight, Reina's demeanor shifts, as she goes on an all-out offensive, and after dealing a strong blow to Jin, his Devil Gene awakens and drives him to retaliate. Reina appears to take note of how the Devil Gene was triggered at the threat of death, and then feigns an injury to bow out of the tournament. Thus Jin is declared the winner. While Jin laments losing control to his Devil Gene once again, Hwoarang enters the ring, keen to fight against Jin once more. As the two fight, the two seem on even footing, and Jin feels a heat within his body, which he had previously forgotten, and quickly his Devil Gene once again reawakens. However, this time he manages to stay in control, and uses its power to come out victorious. Hwoarang then comments on Jin's strange power, and how it's just another part of him. While leaving the tournament, Jin encounters Reina again, who asks to join him in the fight against Kazuya. Jin quizzes her on where she learned the Mishima-style techniques, but she quickly brushes it off, and that she was just copying techniques she had seen on the internet. While Jin is suspicious, he allows Reina to join them, so that he can keep an eye on her. Meanwhile, at G Corporation, Kazuya is tracking the whereabouts of Zafina, who is currently in Italy convening with Claudio, where the two discuss Azazel and how Zafina had sealed his spirit away in her arm in order to stop his return. However, Zafina fears that the world is still in danger, as she can sense that Jin has weakened, while Kazuya only grows stronger. So to avoid disaster, she insists that they must go to his aid, and Xiao Yu steps up to join them. Back at the Yggdrasil base, the experts who have been researching the Devil Gene and its origins, Nicholas and Leo Kleisen, arrive. Leo recognizes Jin and quickly asks to fight in a quick sparring match. Afterwards, Nicholas and Leo explain that devils are humans that were granted a fraction of Azazel's power, and would be used as the demon's servants, and that these devils were able to gain superhuman powers by drawing on their desires. Lars speculates that Kazuya's power comes from his immense greed and lust for power, while Leo states that they had felt no such emotion present in Jin during their match, and believes that Jin's true desires are only pure. While the tournament continues, Raven reports to the leader of the United Nations Independent Forces, Victor Chevalier, that the losing nations in the tournament were already being threatened, and fears that Kazuya will soon take over the world if they don't step in and take action. He informs Victor of Yggdrasil and Jin's intention to stop Kazuya, and Victor agrees to set up a joint operation with them to take down Kazuya. In Italy, the tournament continues inside of a coliseum. While Jin prepares for his next fight against Wing Chun master Leroy Smith, outside of the Colosseum, Yggdrasil and the United Nations forces surround the arena, preparing to strike. As Jin and Leroy meet, Leroy thanks Jin for standing up to Kazuya back in New York, and the two begin to fight. Leroy senses that Jin has become weaker than before, due to him fearing his own power. Leroy warns him that the fear in his heart will stand in his way. So Jin heeds this lesson and begins to fight with his heart, and manages to overcome Leroy, who upon his defeat tells him that Jin shouldn't rely on just strength alone. Kazuya then emerges and proclaims to the crowd that in his world, only the strong will lead, and that the hierarchy of the world will be determined only by the might of each country. Outside, Zafina, Claudio and Xiao Yu arrive, while Yggdrasil and UN forces are preparing to mount their attack. However, Kazuya feels their presence, and knows that they have played directly into his trap. As Zafina enters the arena, she is snatched up by Kazuya, who begins to extract the power of Azazel held inside her arm, which when released shoots up, darkening the sky. After she's caught by Jin, she tells him he must return to the point of origin, to find a way to purge himself of evil. Jin then realizes he must go to Yakushima, while another fighter, Lily, offers to take him in her private jet. However, he wants to stand and fight against Kazuya. Above the ground, Kazuya summons Azazel to take its physical form once more. Once the demon materializes, it offers to absorb Kazuya into its being. However, Kazuya intends to take Azazel's power for himself. And after a fearsome fight, Kazuya is able to overpower the demon. And absorbs it, beginning to take on an even more monstrous devil form. Seeing how Kazuya had just become even more powerful, Jin is told that he must leave and follow Zafina's requests in order to stand any chance of stopping Kazuya. And with the group's encouragement, he heads off, accompanied by Xiao Yu, while the group that remain prepare to stand up against Kazuya. The exorcist Claudio reveals that he has a plan, and asks the others if they can buy him some time, so as he starts enacting a ritual, the others launch into combat. However, they're easily overpowered by Kazuya's new form. until Reina makes her approach, gaining his full attention. As they begin fighting one-on-one, Kazuya recognizes Reina's Mishima-style techniques, but while she's a proficient fighter, she proves to be no match for Kazuya and is quickly overpowered. While she's defeated, she's managed to survive and buy Claudio enough time to enact his ritual, as he casts a spell that restrains Kazuya before launching the Spear of Kephalos at him. However, Kazuya manages to break free, evading the attack. Claudio falls to the ground exhausted, and Kazuya begins to charge his laser. But Claudio had planned for this, and redirects the spear just moments before he struck. And Claudio is vaporized. However, his sacrifice wasn't in vain, as the spear hits Kazuya and clips his shoulder. While the injury is minor in size, it causes Kazuya's new form to become unstable, and he is forced to flee. While approaching Yakushima, Jin reflects upon how his village was destroyed and the loss of his mother, Jun, at the hands of Ogre. After they land, Jin and Xiaoyu start to explore the island, when the two find a clearing that Xiaoyu suggests that they spar in to see if it can help awaken something inside of him. After the bout, Jin starts to hear a lullaby which draws him into a sanctum, where he falls unconscious. Outside, G Corporation has tracked their location and has sent a fleet of jackbots that Xiaoyu takes on to defend Jin. Meanwhile, Yggdrasil and UN forces arrive at the island and are joined by some of the fighters at the tournament as they prepare to fight against G Corporation's army and also the fighters that they've recruited for themselves. As the fighters tear through G Corp's forces and clash against the other fighters on the battlefield, Alyssa reports to Lars that she's located Jin and Xiaoyu and they're in need of assistance, so Lars rushes to their aid. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Reina approaches Nina, and the two begin to fight, during which Nina manages to figure out Reina's connection to the Mishima bloodline. She then decides it's time for her to leave the G Corporation, but Reina offers her a position working for her, which Nina says she'll consider after her vacation. While the battle rages on, Kazuya flies overhead and begins firing down on the battlefield, where Reina purposefully stands in the path of his beam. Kazuya then senses the presence of Jin and leaves in pursuit. But down below, Reina has survived the attack, and her eyes show that something has awoken within her. Lars arrives at Jin's location just in time to protect an exhausted Xiaoyu. However, it's not long before Kazuya arrives and fights Lars. Even against Kazuya's immense strength, Lars fights with every ounce of strength he has to hold Kazuya off, exhibiting the same tenacity that his father Heihachi had once before. While still unconscious, Jin is taunted about the loss of his mother by his devil form, who tells him that power derived from anger and hatred is essential, but Jin rejects this. His devil form then taunts him for his past and how he ignited the war across the world, and states that solitude is the only way for him to atone for his sins. However, Jin acknowledges his past actions and that they have given him the duty to move forward, striving to improve and make amends. Jin continues into his subconscious and encounters his devil form once again, and Jin resolves that he's done rejecting his devil form as an innate part of himself, acknowledging that he can only move on if he accepts it and his past. So he asks the devil form to free him from the chains that bind him. After they fight, his devil form breaks Jin's chains and asks him what he truly desires, and Jin reveals that he wants to protect those close to him and asks the devil to aid him, who then happily obliges. As the devil grants him all of his power, Jin realizes that when the devil form had taken a hold in the past, it was all in the efforts to protect him. He thanks his devil form and then flies off in his devil form, which now has one white wing. As Lars continues to fight Kazuya, Jin awakes just in time to save him from receiving a fatal blow. He then heads off to put an end to Kazuya. While they fight, Jin is able to hold his own. However, Kazuya remains confident that he can't be stopped, and attempts to destroy the island of Yakushima. Jin leaps into action and attempts to hold back the attack, resolute to stop it even if he has to die in the process. But then he sees a vision of his mother, who tells him that even a noble death will cause pain to the ones he cares about protecting, and that the Kazama style exists to protect the well-being of all life. Jin then asks if he has the right to desire life after all he's done. She tells him that a Kazama's power is to foster life and cleanse evil. Jin then takes on a new, more angelic form and is told by Jun to use his power to save himself and Kazuya. With the form of Angel Jin, he's now able to deflect the attack and use the power of purification. As their fight continues, Jin manages to withstand Kazuya's attacks and match his power as Jin fights to purify Kazuya. The two eventually clash fists, causing a blast so strong that their devil afflictions are eradicated from their beings. Now, with their powers gone, they continue to fight in their human form, where Kazuya puts up a fierce fight. However, Jin refuses to quit and begins to fight with the Mishima style that he had once rejected. While Kazuya continues to proclaim that power is everything, Jin denies that belief. But Kazuya manages to overpower Jin once more. But Jin continues to stand up, spurred on by the thoughts of everyone he wants to protect. So he embraces his past, those he cares for, and his desire to live in order to finally defeat Kazuya. And finally, Jin walks away victorious, after eradicating the devil gene from himself and his father. After the fearsome bout, he looks over the horizon and thanks his mother and hopes to meet her again one day, which could be sooner than he thinks, as while Kazuya lays defeated on the ground, he's approached by a figure, appearing to be Jun, who may still be alive, as in an unlockable cutscene, you can see that she was able to draw Ogre to the Kazama family sanctum and defeat the creature, but in the process was gravely injured and laid down to sleep upon the altar of the sanctum, potentially being kept alive by the area's mystical powers. After Kazuya's defeat, the world appears to be at peace for now. However, back on the battlefield, Reina stands up, revealing that Heihachi is her father, and taking a new devil form. And thus ends Tekken 8. While we now have the answer to many questions, there's still much left to explore, such as the true origins of Reina. The two main theories at the moment are that Heihachi may have conceived her with a woman who descends from another bloodline that also possessed the devil gene, or that she was the result of the gene splicing experiments that Heihachi undertook after the events of Tekken 3, which I personally think is the most likely of the two. And that's everything we know of the Tekken story so far. While there is an alternative ending for Kazuya defeating Jin and continuing on with his global invasion, for now it seems that it's most likely an additional non-canon ending, as it goes against the main theme of hope and redemption in Tekken 8, with the ending being labelled as the despair ending. But who knows? This is Tekken after all, and the story has been anything but straightforward up to this point, so we'll have to wait and see. If you've made it this far in the video, thanks so much for watching. If you could drop a like on this video, that would be great. And let me know in the comments, what do you think is on the horizon for Tekken? Anyway, thanks again for watching, and I'll leave some links on screen to some of my other content.